Hello, I'm Lisa Jackson from Ann Arbor's Independent Community Police Oversight Commission, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about taking action on the community level. So, lots of people ask the question about what can they do on the ground to support police oversight or police reform. And many of us understand that police are a reflection of our entire community, our entire society, of American society. And that even if you made police as perfect as you could, whatever that would mean to you, that we would still have lots of problems in our society. So it's very clear to us in doing oversight work that one of the challenges we face is that police are asked to do things that are outside the job description. They're often asked to be social workers when they have no social work training. For example, in most communities, if you have a mental health crisis, let's say you have a friend who is feeling suicidal or has expressed thoughts that they might kill themselves, you want an emergency response to that. And so you call 911. And maybe you ask 911 for a social worker, or maybe you don't think to do that because it's a crisis and you just call 911 because that's what we do in emergencies. Well, you're going to get a police officer dispatched to you. And police officers' response to things is a police officer's response. They are not trained social workers. They are not therapists. And so what we have seen in many communities across the country is that when police show up to situations where a person is suicidal, the police have guns drawn. And they may ask the person if they have some sort of implement like a knife to drop it. And if the person doesn't drop it, we have seen police shoot and kill people who were suicidal. That's a problem. When a person calls 911, they're usually asking for help, and they're not expecting that the police are going to escalate that situation. They're not expecting that the police are actually going to cause more harm to the person who might be suicidal, right? So that's just an example that shows you how mental health issues certainly overlap with the police. And we could certainly discuss people walking around in the street who have mental health issues, who come in contact with the police, and the police have a limited way of interacting with citizens, including those with mental health issues. So I think when we think about police reform, if we really think about it well, we should do it holistically. We should understand that communities need adequate mental health services to people. And adequate means accessible, that you don't have to be wealthy to get those mental health services that you need. You need adequate housing in your community. Homeless people have significant numbers of interactions with police. And even though homeless people are often most vulnerable to crime, they are often most targeted by police. And that's a paradox that's problematic. If people have substance abuse issues, their interactions with police are not going to have the clear cognitions that someone else might have, or if that person might have when they're not under the influence. And so I don't think it's realistic for us to expect police to be good social workers or to be good substance abuse counselors or to do housing interventions or to help provide housing for people. And so communities that are going to be functional need all of those things to work well in addition to a police force. Lots of communities are thinking about, and in Ann Arbor, we're talking about having perhaps an alternate phone number. Could you call 711 if you need a crisis response team for a mental health issue, for a person whom you notice on the street is homeless, or if somebody is sleeping in your doorway, or if somebody seems intoxicated or under the influence or is exhibiting some erratic behavior? Could you call some sort of emergency response that is not a law enforcement response? And I think that's a valid question, and that's going to take resources, but I think that's a thing that a lot of communities are thinking about. Could you have those services connected to the police such that when a dispatcher gets a call for a person in distress, then a community mental health team is dispatched, such that you're just using one 911 number? That might be an option too. There's some suggestion that there are people such as substance abuse counselors or social workers, housing advocates that should work within the police. I think a lot of police administrators have talked about how they are not used to supervising those kinds of professions and that they might be better situated outside the police. But maybe that's something that might differ from community to community. It's very important to have those kinds of resources in your community. I think in 2020, most of us feel like there aren't adequate services like that across the country. So community mental health in the 1970s was a lot more robust than it is now. And as cities and municipalities have experienced deficits, community mental health has often taken a hit. And so now here we are in 2020, and we realize that police are having to do things that are not law enforcement related. We realize, perhaps a bit too late, that community mental health services needed to be more robust. Maybe you already knew that, but I think it's come up again in the conversations that we see now. So if you were interested in your community in taking action, what kinds of things could you do? You could look for nonprofits. You could look for even agencies connected to your government that are involved in providing mental health services to the public. You could advocate for zoning for affordable housing in your community. That's a big struggle in Ann Arbor because it's a small college town and the median income is so high, and we have college students who take up almost all of the rental availability. There isn't much affordable housing. And when affordable housing measures come up for city council votes, they always get voted down for one reason or another. And we're letting we're letting the notion of a perfect affordable housing situation get in the way of a good affordable housing situation. And so we need more affordable housing in Ann Arbor. Lots of municipalities do. And one of the things people can do to facilitate that is be vocal with your elected officials and support those kinds of measures when they come up, even if they're in your neighborhood. So I think one place to start for community action is reaching out to organizations that already exist, seeing how you can support nonprofits that work to eradicate homelessness. So in Ann Arbor, we have several organizations like that, one of which is Ozone House, which works with youth homelessness. And you might think that in a city as wealthy as Ann Arbor, we wouldn't have any homeless youth, but we do. And that sometimes makes the problem harder to solve even. But volunteering with an agency like that or donating to an agency like that, and don't feel like donations have to be big, it really supports their mission. And when they get kids stably housed, and when they get young people stably housed, particularly those who are in the foster care system and age out of foster care, those are young people who don't have some of the skills and resources that they might have had, and they need stable housing. But preventing them from being homeless means that they can contribute to the community, and that's really important. We don't want to lose the talent that many young people have. And so organizations, nonprofits that work in the area of homelessness are critically important to any community, whether it's youth homelessness or adult homelessness or veterans homelessness. Substance abuse facilities, making those resources available, widely available, is critically important. Thinking about housing in your community, not just voting for affordable housing, but what happens with homelessness? How do we have enough beds for people who are homeless? Are we doing programs to help people get out of the cycle of homelessness? And so when you live in a community, some communities see more homeless people than others. And so if you see homeless people in your community, why is it that you continue to see people, cycle in and out of homelessness? What can we do to help transition people to being stably housed and keep them stably housed, right? And so those are all things that are accessible to people who are interested in volunteering and donating and helping. If you're interested in working on police oversight at a grassroots level, you can find like-minded people. When you think about police oversight, when you talk to your neighbors, when you talk about people, you can get together as a small group and start to find other people with those interests and start lobbying your city council, your mayor, whatever your governing body is in your city, to develop some police oversight. It takes public pressure. I think it's really hard as an individual. The problems seem huge and it's hard to know where to start. But I think that working at the community level to take action really means that any person needs just to take a small step. And so sometimes it's easier not to think about the big, huge problem, but how can you help a little? A lot of people helping a little is really, really powerful. And so think about volunteering, think about getting informed in your community about what's going on with housing and substance abuse, and mental health issues, and learn about what's unique to your municipality. Because I think even though we have to think globally and nationally about these issues, we really have to make sure that whatever solutions we come up with work in our particular area and work for our local government and our local flavor. Ann Arbor is a quirky college town, and so what works here isn't going to work in Grand Rapids, it's not going to work in New York City, it's not going to work in Los Angeles. So wherever you live, you can volunteer at established organizations, you can get together with like-minded people, you can start emailing your city council, your mayor to say, hey, I care about this issue, what are you doing about it? And I think even something as, people use email all day, every day, and they don't think about how powerful it is. But when city council starts to hear from people about a particular issue, they pay attention. And so if you and your friends and people that you meet start to communicate with city council about an issue, it forces them to start to pay attention to it. When you start to use your social media to talk about issues and galvanize and mobilize people around a single issue, whether that's a big thing with several small pieces underneath it, or whether that's a really focused issue, then everybody in the community and anybody in a community can have a huge impact on actions that could take place that could benefit their community.